Hello everyone. In today's session, we will try to cover or discover the most important metrics to know in the context of marketing mix models. Marketing mix modeling is composed of different steps. The first one is the measurement. The second one is optimization and forecasting. For each of those phases, there are certain metrics that need to be computed in order to understand better what's happening in measurement and what's happening in optimization and forecasting. Contribution is probably the most important metric to introduce here because it's the start of everything. What we mean by contribution is the impact that a specific factor had on your KPI. Say, for example, we have modeled sales in terms of units, okay? And we have measured that the contribution of paid search is 22,600 units. It means that thanks to the search activity that you have invested in, this has driven to you 22,600 units. Contribution could be expressed in absolute terms, for example, 22,600 units, or in terms of percentage of total sales. Now, the other thing that contribution is very useful for is what we call the layer chart or the contribution chart. It is a chart where you see the contribution of every single factor. If you sum up all the contribution, you obtain your actual model. And obviously, you add to this the error of your measurement, you obtain your total model. Linked to the concept of contribution is the waterfall chart. Waterfall charts are very important when it comes to understanding what happened year on year or period on period. For example, we have recorded 1,000 units of sales at semester 1, 2021. And in semester 1, 2022, sales have increased to 1,100 units, meaning that we had a 10% increase in sales in terms of units between 2022 and 2021, focusing on semester 1. Now, what I am interested in knowing is what has driven this difference? What has caused those 100 unit sales? That's exactly the type of answers that you can get from your waterfall chart. If you look at the graph we have here, we can clearly see that 40 units have been driven by search, 30 units by television. However, we lost 50 units to distribution and 30 units to promotions. If you add all those up, we will obtain exactly 100, which is the increase semester on semester for your sales. Waterfall charts can also be expressed in terms of percentages. What I mean by revenue in this context is the following. Assume that we have built a model where we have modeled the impact of media and marketing on unit sales. Now, what we want to do is to convert those unit sales into revenue. Here, there are different options available. Simplest one is to take the average price over the fitted period, multiply it by the incremental contribution, as we have defined it earlier on, to obtain the incremental revenue. If you have more detailed data, say for example weekly prices, you can use this granularity to convert your weekly contribution into weekly revenue and then sum it all up. Now, for certain verticals, like for example telcos or insurance or banking, the revenue has a completely different definition, because when you acquire a customer, not only you will have the revenue today, but you will also have renewals of the service, and that needs to be accounted for. That's why it's very important to compute what you call the lifetime value of a customer. Generally, the lifetime value is externally computed. So you generally request it from your client, or you have it computed by another department if you are working in-house. You take that lifetime value, you multiply it by the incremental contribution in order for you to obtain what we call the revenue. Return on investment or marketing ROI. Marketing ROI is simply the ratio between your incremental revenue and your spend. Here, it's very important to say that both components need to be expressed in terms of value. In most of the cases, when we model digital, for example, we use impressions, or when we model offline, we use GRPs. So there is a need here to convert those GRPs or those impressions into spend. That's what goes into your denominator. Sometimes we are modeling unit sales. And here we need to convert the unit sales in terms of revenue by either multiplying by the average price or the lifetime value, as we were explaining earlier on, in order to have on the denominator something that is expressed in value. Dividing the incremental revenue by the amount of spend will just give us the ROI. The beauty of the ROI, it can help us understand the difference in performance between different media channels. It will tell us each dollar invested in a particular channel, how much contribution it gives us back. However, one needs to be very careful. Having a higher ROI doesn't necessarily mean that we need to invest more into that channel, because sometimes we can have a high ROI in a very saturated channel, which means that we just won't be investing any more money on that channel, even if it is generating a high ROI. Half-life value is linked to the concept of ad stock. Remember when we covered in marketing mix modeling masterclasses the concept of media transformation, we talked a lot about the ad stock and how important it is to add a carryover effect to your advertising to compose the ad stock. Now, the half-life value is linked to this concept. It literally means the number or the amount of time it takes for the ad stock to drop to half. Say, for example, if my half-life is 4 weeks, it means that my ad stock of television, for example, will drop to half by the end of the 4th week. And generally, brands use this concept to know when they need to invest additionally in advertising before the message disappears completely from the minds of their consumers. Effectiveness is a very important metric in marketing mix modeling. Remember, earlier on, we have introduced ROI or MROI as a ratio between incremental revenue and spend. Imagine that we have computed the ROI of television in 2022 and in 2021. Comparing the two, we have seen that the ROI in 2022 is less than 2021. Does this mean that ROI effectiveness has dropped for television in 2022? Not necessarily. We all know that in 2022, there has been a lot of media inflation, which could have caused the ROI to drop. So a drop in ROI does not in all the cases mean that the channel is working less. That's why we need to look at a metric that isolates the impact of media inflation. And that metric is media effectiveness. Now, we distinguish between effectiveness for offline channels and effectiveness for digital channels. Generally, for offline channels, we use GRP as a metric in our modeling, and computing the effectiveness for offline media would be just looking at the ratio between incremental revenue and the number of GRPs. So, for example, if we obtain an effectiveness of 100, it means that each 1 GRP contributes 100 units in revenue. Now, if you look at the digital channels, the way we compute effectiveness is simply the incremental revenue divided by million of impressions. And using those metrics, we will be able to compare between different channels while we are isolating the impact of media inflation. Efficiency. Efficiency is one of those metrics that could be computed in the context of marketing mix modeling. However, it is less popular than the other metrics that have been already introduced. There are different ways to compute efficiency. One of them is to look at the ratio between the percentage contribution from total media divided by the spend. This way, we'll be computing what each dollar spent on the channel will bring us back in terms of percentage contribution from media. Another way of computing efficiency is to look at the ratio between the percentage contribution of a channel from total media contribution divided by its percentage share in spend. So it's like we are computing an index. So if it is higher than 1, it means that the contribution of a channel from the total media contribution is higher than its share of spend, which is a good thing. Diminishing returns. Of course, we cannot talk about optimization without mentioning the backbone of any optimization exercise, which is the diminishing return curve. It is simply a curve that depicts the relationship between spend on a channel and the incremental revenue generated by that channel. Obviously, if we divide the incremental revenue by the spend, we obtain the ROI. Now, the relationship between spend and revenue is not linear, it's actually concave, meaning that the more we spend on a particular channel, the more revenue we get, but at a slower and a slower pace. As we are approaching high level of spend, we are hitting diminishing returns, and it becomes very hard to acquire additional incremental revenues. The diminishing return curve is not always concave. Sometimes we go for S-shaped curve. In this context, we have a convex part characterized by increasing returns up to a certain point, and then we obtain a concave part where we have diminishing returns. To know more about these curves, you can revisit our classes, part of Season 2, Optimization, Marketing Mix Modeling Masterclasses. Marginal returns are tightly linked to the concept of diminishing returns curves that we have introduced earlier on. It simply means the additional revenues that we acquire as a result of an additional investment. Now, from the measurement exercise, we derive diminishing returns curve for each channel. But now let's look precisely to what happens as we increase the spend. First, this is a positive relationship. It means that as we spend money, we get and we generate more revenue. However, the additional revenue that is brought by an additional spend is decreasing. The 1 million investment used to bring back 1.5 million in revenue. Now, the same 1 million that is invested later on won't bring any more 1.5 million, it will only bring back $0.5 million. And that's exactly what we mean by decreasing marginal returns. So the effect per dollar spent is decreasing as we move down the curve until we reach the complete saturation, meaning that it becomes useless to spend any dollar on that channel because the channel is simply saturated. The last concept I am going to introduce here is the concept of optimal execution range. First thing first, we can only talk about optimal execution range in the context of S-shaped diminishing returns curve. Okay? Meaning that curve where we have a convex part and then we have a concave part later on. Through those curves, we can devise an optimal range, and the minimum boundary of the range is the maximum marginal ROI, and the upper boundary of the range is actually the maximum ROI. And this serves as a recommended range of spend for our client to invest in when it comes to a particular channel. However, it's very important to think about optimization as a holistic exercise. It's not only about the channel that you are looking at, it's not about the optimal execution range for that channel. You need to consider the other optimal execution ranges when you decide on where to put your money. We have explained this further in Season 1, Optimization Masterclasses, and also in Season 2, when we talked about the transformation in marketing mix modeling, focusing on diminishing returns. Thank you for watching our videos. I hope this video was particularly useful to you. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.